The morning air was heavy with the smell of smoke, metal, and dust. The battlefield stretched as far as the eye could see, with broken weapons, scattered shields, and fallen banners marking the path of the long and brutal war. The soldiers who remained stood in careful formation, their bodies tired, their armor battered, and their hearts weighed down with exhaustion. They had returned from a conflict that had lasted many months, a conflict that had demanded everything from them: their courage, their patience, and sometimes even their friends. Among these weary soldiers stood a young man named Aaron. His armor bore the scratches and dents of countless battles, and his boots were coated with the mud of 1,000 marches. He was not the tallest or the strongest in the army, but his eyes carried a quiet determination, and his movements had saved lives more than once. He remembered the final battle vividly, the roar of enemy forces, the clash of steel, and the cries of friends falling beside him. Each memory weighed heavily on his mind, yet he kept his posture straight. He had survived, and he knew he owed it to more than just luck. The soldiers were summoned to the palace courtyard, a vast open space where stone met sky. The palace itself was a magnificent structure, with golden towers that caught the first rays of sunlight and reflected them like mirrors. Flags representing every region of the kingdom hung along the walls, their colors faded by time and war. The soldiers entered the courtyard silently, their footsteps echoing softly against the stone floor. Even the most seasoned warriors felt a tremor of respect and fear as they approached the center of the palace. At the heart of the courtyard, Queen Lyra awaited. Her presence was commanding yet calm, like a steady flame in the wind. She wore a robe of deep blue adorned with silver embroidery, each stitch telling the story of the kingdom she had vowed to protect. Her golden crown rested lightly on her head, not as a symbol of vanity but as a reminder of her responsibilities. Her hair, dark as night, framed a face that had known joy, grief, and the heavy weight of leadership. When the queen walked, the soldiers instinctively straightened their backs. They had fought for her, but it was more than duty. They felt the unspoken connection between ruler and people. Queen Lyra's eyes scanned the assembly, lingering on each soldier for a brief moment as if reading their very souls. She raised her hand slightly and a hush fell over the courtyard. Even the birds in the nearby trees seemed to pause as though they understood that this moment was different. The queen's voice broke the silence, calm yet powerful enough to reach every corner of the courtyard. "Soldiers of the realm," she began, her tone steady and measured, "you have returned victorious. You have endured hardships that would break the hearts of ordinary men. You have fought with honor, and you have protected this kingdom with your lives." The soldiers listened in silence. Some held their weapons loosely, some clutched their shields, and some simply stood, letting the words of their queen wash over them. They had expected praise, but what came next was unexpected. The queen's eyes seemed to shine brighter, and her voice dropped to a whisper that carried across the courtyard. "But I must ask one question," she continued. "A question that is as important as any battle you have faced. A question that will not be answered with weapons or strategy. I ask, are you alone?" The question floated in the air, strange and powerful. The soldiers exchanged uncertain glances. Many thought it was a test of loyalty, while others felt it carried a deeper meaning they could not yet grasp. The words were simple, yet they struck like a thunderbolt. Every man and woman who had survived the war felt their hearts skip a beat. The battlefield had taught them many lessons, but none had prepared them for this. Aaron felt a sudden tightness in his chest. He thought of the comrades who had fought beside him and now lay in distant fields, their lives extinguished too soon. He remembered the laughter of friends around the campfire, the shared meals, the quiet moments of fear before battle. Their faces were alive in his memory, and he realized the truth behind the queen's words. He had never been truly alone. Even in the darkest hours, their courage had carried him. The queen's gaze swept over the soldiers again, and her voice rose slightly. "Do you fight for me alone? Or do you fight for those who stand beside you, seen or unseen?" A shiver ran through the crowd. Some soldiers bowed their heads, overcome by emotion. Some felt shame for forgetting the silent support of their fallen friends. And some, like Aaron, felt a quiet pride, knowing that even in loss, the bonds they had formed in battle remained unbroken. Slowly, Queen Lyra walked down the steps that led to the courtyard. Her movements were graceful, deliberate, and commanding. As she passed, the soldiers felt the weight of her presence. It was not fear alone. They sensed her wisdom, her experience, and the love she bore for her people. She stopped in front of Iran, and for a moment the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them. Her eyes, deep and unwavering, met his. "Tell me, soldier," she said, her voice soft yet firm. "When you raised your sword in battle, who stood with you?" Aaron's lips moved, but no sound came. He swallowed hard, fighting the lump in his throat. Memories of the battlefield, of friends who had fallen, of moments when he had almost given up surged through him. Finally he spoke, his voice steady despite the emotion that trembled beneath it. "My friends," he said, "even if they are gone, they were with me." The Queen nodded slowly, a faint smile appearing on her lips. The soldiers behind Aaron felt something shift in the air, a warmth, a recognition, and a shared understanding. The Queen's question was no longer a riddle or a test. It was a reminder that courage was not measured alone but in connection, in loyalty, and in the invisible support of those who had fought and fallen beside them. For a long moment, silence filled the courtyard. Then, as if a spell had been lifted, whispers spread among the soldiers. One by one they nodded to each other, acknowledging the truth that Aaron had spoken. They were not alone. Not truly. Their memories, their bonds, and their shared courage connected them across the space between life and death, past and present. Queen Lyra straightened, her eyes glimmering with both pride and sorrow. She raised her hand once more, not to command but to honor. "Remember this," she said, her voice carrying over the courtyard like a gentle wind. "The strength of a soldier is never only in his arm, nor in his blade, nor in the armor he wears. It is in the hearts of those who fight beside him and in the memory of those who have fallen. Alone, a soldier may survive. Together, a soldier becomes a legend." Aaron felt a surge of emotion rise within him. He thought of his unit, of the friends who had trusted him, of the bonds that had saved his life countless times. He realized that the Queen's question was not just for the soldiers, it was a lesson that would stay with him forever. Even the most isolated soul could draw strength from memory, loyalty, and the shared spirit of comradeship. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting golden light across the courtyard, the soldiers felt a renewed sense of purpose. Their journey had been long and painful, but they were not broken. They were united. Their eyes met those of their comrades, and in that silent exchange they found courage once more. The Queen stepped back, allowing the soldiers to reflect on her words. And though no one spoke immediately, the impact of her question lingered, echoing in every heart. For Aaron, the lesson was clear. Battles would come and go. Leaders would rise and fall. But the bonds forged in the fire of adversity, the memory of those who had stood with him and the courage shared among soldiers, these would never fade. They would live forever, carried in the hearts of every soldier who had asked themselves the Queen's question, "Are you alone?" And in that moment, standing in the silent courtyard, surrounded by those who had fought beside him, Aaron understood. None of them were alone. Not truly. The courtyard remained quiet long after Queen Lyra's words had echoed through the stone walls. Soldiers shifted nervously, their hands resting on sword hilts and shield edges as though the question she had asked required a physical answer rather than words. The morning sun glinted off their armor, making the scene almost surreal. They had survived war, but now they faced something unexpected, a question that seemed to pierce deeper than any blade. "Are you alone?" At first the words felt confusing. No one spoke. Some tilted their heads, unsure if this was a test of obedience or courage. Others thought perhaps the Queen spoke in riddles. Yet as silence stretched, the meaning began to settle into their minds. It was not about the war they had just fought. It was about the lives they carried with them, the friends they had lost, and the bonds they could not see but could feel. Aaron's thoughts returned to the last battle. The memory was vivid, almost too vivid. He remembered the thunder of hooves, the clash of swords, and the cries of men who had given everything to protect the kingdom. He remembered the moment when his closest friend, Darren, had taken a fatal blow while shielding him. Darren had smiled weakly and nodded, telling him silently to keep going. That memory alone had given Aaron strength when everything else seemed impossible. He knew then that he had never truly fought alone, even in the chaos and darkness. The soldiers were unsure how to respond. A few looked to their commanders for guidance, but even the generals seemed caught off guard. Their faces were calm, but their eyes revealed the same confusion that ran through every soldier. The question seemed simple, yet it demanded something profound. a recognition of connection, loss, and courage that transcended the individual. Queen Lyra moved slowly through the ranks, her gaze sweeping over each face. Her eyes were sharp, yet there was a softness that spoke of empathy and understanding. She paused before a young soldier whose knees shook ever so slightly. His armor was scratched and his helmet dented, yet he stood tall, gripping his sword like it was the only anchor keeping him grounded. "Tell me," the queen said softly, "when you fought, who was with you? Who gave you courage when fear threatened to take over? Who whispered hope when the darkness closed in?" The young soldier swallowed hard. His lips quivered and his hands trembled slightly. Finally he whispered, "My brother. He fought beside me even though he fell before me." The queen nodded. "Yes," she said. "Even when they are gone, they remain with you. Their courage flows through your veins. Their memory guides your hand. They are never truly gone." A ripple of understanding passed through the soldiers. The question was no longer abstract. It had become personal. Each man and woman remembered someone they had fought with, someone who had inspired them or someone who had saved their life. Some thought of fathers, mothers, siblings, or friends. Some thought of mentors and teachers who had shaped them long before they ever picked up a sword. And some thought of soldiers who had fallen beside them, their faces etched in memory forever. Aaron felt his chest tighten. He thought of Darren, of all the moments they had shared during training, during marches, and in the heat of battle. He remembered the quiet laughter, the whispered advice, and the way Darren had always believed in him even when he doubted himself. Aaron realized the truth of the Queen's question. Strength was not something you held alone. It was something you carried from those who believed in you, from those who walked beside you, and even from those who had fallen. As the Queen moved further down the line, she spoke to another soldier, this one older, with gray streaking through his black hair. "And you?" she asked. "Do you fight alone?" The man's eyes glistened. He had been in many battles, had survived more than most. Yet the question touched something deep within him. "No, Your Majesty," he said firmly. "I fight with every soldier I have ever trained, with every comrade I have lost, and with every person who believed in me." The Queen smiled faintly. "Good, that is the way of true warriors. Alone we may survive, but together we inspire, we protect, and we endure." The courtyard seemed to hold its breath. The wind rustled the banners, carrying the sound of distant mountains and forests. The soldiers felt as though the battlefield itself had become silent in respect. Even the birds perched on the palace walls seemed to watch, as if waiting for the answers of the soldiers to unfold. Aaron's thoughts shifted again. He remembered moments in battle where fear had almost consumed him. He had felt helpless, surrounded by chaos, with enemy forces pressing from all sides. In those moments, it was not his sword that saved him. It was the memory of those beside him. The courage of Darren, the laughter of another soldier as they joked in the face of danger, the steady presence of the captain who had never given up. These memories had strengthened his resolve. Even now, long after the battle, those invisible hands still guided him. The Queen returned to the center of the courtyard. She raised her hand, signaling for silence once more. Her voice rang out clearly, carrying authority, warmth, and care. "The battlefield does not make a soldier alone. The people who walk beside you, the memories you carry, the courage you share, they are your strength. Even when you do not see them, even when they are gone, they are with you always." A wave of emotion spread across the soldiers. Some closed their eyes, letting the words sink in. Some wiped tears that had formed unexpectedly. And some looked at each other, their eyes meeting in quiet acknowledgement. They understood now that the Queen's question was not a challenge to be answered with a sword, but a truth to be felt in the heart. Aaron felt a warmth spread through him. He realized that even though the war was over and the enemy defeated, the lessons would remain. They would stay with him in every step he took, every battle he faced in the future, and every choice he made. Courage was not about strength alone. It was about connection, loyalty, memory, and the invisible bonds that held people together. The Queen spoke again, her voice softening as she addressed the entire army. "Carry this with you. Let it guide your actions and your decisions. When you are tested, remember those who stood beside you. When you doubt yourself, think of those who believed in you. When you face fear, remember the courage that has been given to you, unseen but ever present." The soldiers remained silent, not because they did not wish to respond, but because they were reflecting. Each one felt a personal connection to the words, a reminder of the sacrifices made, the friendships forged, and the strength gained from unity. Even the generals lowered their eyes, acknowledging the truth in what the Queen said. Aaron glanced at the soldiers around him. He saw men and women who had been strangers a few months ago, now bound by shared experiences and mutual respect. He saw commanders who had led with wisdom, comrades who had laughed, cried, and fought beside him, and even those who had given their lives. In that moment, he understood fully. They were not alone, and neither would they ever be again. Queen Alara raised her hands in a final gesture, not demanding attention, but offering it as a gift. "Go now," she said. "Rest, recover, and remember. You have fought bravely. You have fought together, and you will continue to fight, carrying one another in every step, every action, and every heartbeat." The soldiers bowed their heads, feeling the weight of her words. They began to move, slowly at first, then with more confidence. They returned to their quarters, their camp, and their families, carrying the invisible strength of one another. Aaron walked alongside them, feeling the presence of Darren and the others as clearly as if they were beside him. He felt proud, not because of his own survival, but because he understood what true courage meant. That night, as the campfires flickered across the fields outside the palace, the soldiers shared stories of their experiences. They laughed softly at memories, wiped away tears for lost friends, and vowed never to forget the lessons of the Queen's question. Aaron sat quietly by the fire, staring into the flames. He thought of every comrade, every mentor, every friend lost in battle, and he whispered a silent promise. He would carry them with him always, and in the quiet of the night, with stars scattered across the sky like tiny flames of hope, the soldiers slept more peacefully than they had in months. They were weary, yes, but not broken. They were strong, yes, but not arrogant. And most importantly, they were never alone. The Queen's question had left them speechless at first, but now it had given them something far more valuable than words, a reminder of connection, courage, and the power of unseen bonds. The battle had ended, but a new understanding had begun, and it was a beginning that would carry them through every challenge that lay ahead. The palace was quiet that night. The soldiers rested in their barracks, the soft crackle of campfires echoing through the courtyards. Laughter and murmured conversations carried across the grounds, a gentle reminder that life was returning to its ordinary rhythm. Yet within the walls of the palace, Queen Alara felt a weight that no victory parade could lift. She stood in her private chamber, the cool stone floor beneath her feet contrasting sharply with the heat of her thoughts. The window before her framed the moon, pale and luminous, casting silver light across the room. On the table beside her lay a letter, old and fragile, sealed with the mark of her late brother. Prince Darius had been her guide, her companion, and her protector. He had fallen in the final months of the war, defending the kingdom with unwavering bravery. She traced the edges of the letter with her fingers, feeling the memory of his touch in every crease. "I am not alone either," she whispered, her voice almost lost in the quiet of the room. The Queen's mind wandered back to her childhood, to times before the crown had become her responsibility. She remembered walking through the palace gardens with Darius, the two of them chasing sunlight through the trees, laughing without care. She remembered lessons from their father about strategy and diplomacy, lessons that now guided her every decision, and she remembered the promises they had made to protect the kingdom, to protect each other, and to never forget the people who relied on them. But the war had changed everything. Friends had fallen, families had been separated, and the kingdom had been tested in ways no one could have imagined. Yet even in loss, the Queen realized there had always been someone standing beside her. The memories of those she had loved, of those she had guided, and of those she had led were never truly gone. They were her strength even when no one else could see it. A soft knock at the door broke her reverie. Her advisor, a man named Taryn, stepped into the room. His expression was calm, but his eyes carried concern. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing slightly. "Reports from the soldiers have been sent. They are recovering well. They speak often of your words today. They say the question you asked has changed something in their hearts." Queen Alara nodded slowly. "I hoped it would," she replied, her voice soft yet firm. "But it is not enough for them to hear my words. They must feel them, understand them, and carry them with them always. The bonds they share are their true strength. Terran hesitated, then spoke again. Do you think, Your Majesty, that the question you asked them applies to you as well? The Queen turned back to the window, gazing at the silver moonlight. Every question I ask of them, I ask of myself, she said quietly. Every lesson, every truth, every challenge. It is meant to remind us all that none of us are truly alone. I have lost so much, yet I have carried them with me, and they have guided me even in their absence. For a long moment the room was silent. The Queen's eyes lingered on the moon, its glow reflecting the mixture of sorrow and hope in her heart. She thought of her soldiers, of the young men and women who had faced death with courage she sometimes doubted she herself could summon. She thought of the families who waited for them, the people of the kingdom who relied on their protection, and the unseen heroes whose sacrifices had ensured the realm's survival. I must honor them, she whispered, touching the old letter once more. Not just with words, but with action. Not just with recognition, but with remembrance. They fought for this kingdom, for its people, and for me, and I will not forget them. The Queen turned from the window and walked slowly across the chamber. She moved to a small table where she kept a collection of tokens, letters, medals, and gifts from soldiers who had returned from the front. Each item told a story. Each story carried a memory. She picked up a simple pendant, one given to her by a young soldier named Lyra, who had saved a village during the war. Even in their absence, she said softly, their courage remains with me. I am never truly alone, for their spirit guides my decisions, shapes my heart, and strengthens my will. Terran watched quietly, understanding the depth of her reflection. Your Majesty, he said finally, your soldiers will follow you because you fight alongside them in spirit, even when you cannot be physically present. They see your courage, your compassion, and your understanding. They trust you because you carry not just the crown, but the memory of those who came before them. Queen Alara nodded. She felt a quiet comfort in Terran's words, though it did not erase the ache in her heart. I know, she said, but the responsibility is heavy. To lead a kingdom, to protect its people, to guide its soldiers, it is a burden that does not end when the war is won. Every decision I make echoes through their lives, and every life carries a story that will outlast me. I must honor them even when I walk these halls alone. The night deepened and the moon climbed higher in the sky. The palace seemed almost still, as though the walls themselves listened to her thoughts. Queen Alara walked to the balcony, the cool night air brushing against her face. She looked out over the kingdom she had sworn to protect, the fields, forests, and rivers that had witnessed both peace and war. In the distance, she could see the faint glow of campfires where her soldiers rested. Their lives, their courage, and their loyalty were all a testament to what she had always believed, that strength is not found alone, but in connection, memory, and shared purpose. The Queen's thoughts returned to her brother. Prince Darius had fallen in battle, but his presence lingered in her mind. Every strategy she devised, every speech she gave, and every decision she made carried a piece of him. You are with me, she whispered to the night. In every choice, in every thought, you guide me still. Her eyes shifted to the horizon where stars glittered like tiny points of light. Each star seemed to represent a life, a memory, or a story. She imagined the soldiers who had fought beside her, the friends who had fallen, and the people whose lives had been touched by courage. She realized that the questions she had asked the army was as much for herself as it had been for them. In seeking their answers, she had discovered her own. She was never truly alone. Terran approached quietly, bowing his head slightly. Your Majesty, I will leave you to your reflection. But know this, the kingdom is strong because you carry these truths with you. The soldiers, the people, and even those who have passed, they all stand with you, in spirit, in memory, and in loyalty. Queen Alara nodded, her heart filled with a mixture of sorrow and gratitude. Thank you, Terran, she said softly. It is a heavy weight, but one I will carry proudly, for they are not gone. They never were. She returned to the table, looking once more at the letter from her brother. Carefully she opened it and read the words again, each sentence a reminder of love, trust, and shared responsibility. She folded the letter and placed it in a small chest, alongside other memories she had collected over the years. Each item was a symbol of connection, a proof that even in loss one could find strength. As the night deepened further, Queen Alara finally allowed herself to sit. Her mind wandered through the battles, the faces of soldiers, and the lessons she had learned. The kingdom depended on her, but she understood now that it was not her strength alone that mattered. It was the strength of everyone she had led, everyone she had loved, and everyone who had believed in her. The Queen's question, "Are you alone?" had a personal answer she now carried in her heart. She was not alone. She was never alone, and in that realization a sense of calm settled over her. She knew that when she faced the next challenge, when the kingdom called upon her again, she would do so with courage not only from herself, but from the countless unseen supporters who had shaped her life. The soldiers in the courtyard, the memories of the fallen, and the spirit of her brother, all stood with her. The night passed quietly, and when the first light of dawn crept through the windows, Queen Lyra rose. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, a strength that was not merely her own, but shared with all who had fought, loved, and believed. The question that had frozen hearts in the courtyard the day before had found its answer in her own. She was not alone, and in that truth lay the power to lead her kingdom with wisdom, courage, and compassion. Queen Lyra knew that the days ahead would bring new challenges, new decisions, and perhaps new battles. But she also knew that she carried more than her own resolve. She carried memories, courage, and love, the unseen but unbreakable bonds of life itself. And with that understanding, she was ready to face whatever came next, confident in the knowledge that the Queen of the Realm was never truly alone. The sun rose slowly over the kingdom, casting golden light across the palace courtyard. The banners fluttered gently in the morning breeze, and the air carried a sense of calm after the long months of war. Soldiers gathered once again, this time in their clean, polished armor. Their movements were precise, their formation perfect, but the weight of yesterday's question, "Are you alone?" still lingered in every heart. Aaron stood near the front, his posture steady but his mind alive with reflection. He remembered the Queen's words from the day before, the lessons they had learned and the memories of those who had fought beside them. He glanced around at the faces of his fellow soldiers. Some were smiling quietly, others bowed their heads in thought, and a few looked nervous, unsure if they had fully understood the meaning of the Queen's question. At the center of the courtyard, Queen Lyra appeared once more. Her robe of deep blue shimmered in the morning light, silver embroidery catching the sun like streams of starlight. The crown on her head was not heavy with pride, but with responsibility. The responsibility of leading a kingdom that had seen so much suffering and guiding soldiers who had endured more than most could imagine. She stepped forward, and the courtyard fell silent. The soldiers' eyes followed her, each of them feeling the familiar mix of respect, fear, and admiration. She raised her hand slightly and spoke, her voice calm yet firm. "Yesterday I asked you a question that left many of you speechless. I asked if you were alone. Today I have seen your answer in your eyes. You are never alone when your hearts remember those who stood beside you, when your courage carries the memory of others, and when your loyalty honors the fallen." Aaron felt a warmth spread through him. The Queen's words were no longer abstract, they were alive, present, and real. He thought of Darren, his closest friend, who had fallen protecting him. He thought of Lyra, whose courage had saved countless villagers during the war. He thought of every soldier who had fought and every comrade who had given their life. Each of them, though gone, was with him now, in memory, in spirit, and in courage. The Queen held up a silver sword, the royal blade of the realm. Its surface reflected the sunlight, casting sparkling patterns across the courtyard. "A kingdom is not strong because of one ruler," she said, her voice rising with authority and passion. "A kingdom is strong because its people believe in one another. Soldiers, look at those around you. Every face you see carries courage, sacrifice, and loyalty. You are part of something greater than yourselves. You are part of a shared strength that can never be broken." The soldiers bowed their heads slightly, letting her words sink deep into their hearts. They understood now that victory was not measured only by battles won, but by the unity and connection that had carried them through every challenge. Strength was not simply the power of an individual. It was the sum of all who stood together, seen and unseen, living and gone. Aaron's mind wandered to the final battle, to the moments when fear had almost overwhelmed him. He had felt surrounded, alone and helpless, but in those moments it was not his sword that had saved him. It was the memory of those beside him. It was Darren's courage, Leora's determination, the captain's guidance, and the support of his entire unit. Even when death had come close, he had survived because he was connected to something larger than himself. The Queen walked slowly among the soldiers, her eyes meeting each one. She spoke to them individually, acknowledging their courage, their sacrifices, and their unity. When she reached Aaron, she paused. Her gaze softened as she looked at him, and she said, "You carry them with you, soldier. Their courage is your strength. Their memory is your guide, and their spirit is your shield. Never forget that." Aaron bowed deeply, feeling the weight and honor of her words. The soldiers around him felt a similar connection, a sense of pride and shared purpose that made their hearts beat stronger. The Queen's question had become more than a query. It had become a reminder, a lesson, and a bond that tied them all together. Suddenly, a young soldier stepped forward from the ranks. His armor was polished, but his hands shook slightly. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice clear but nervous. "I was afraid yesterday. I thought I had to answer alone, but now I understand. I am never alone. Every soldier beside me, every friend I have lost, every person who believed in me, they are with me. Always." The Queen smiled, her eyes glimmering with pride and compassion. "Yes," she said softly, "that is the truth of courage. To be brave is not to stand alone. It is to carry others in your heart, to honor them in your actions, and to let their strength guide you when you feel weak." Aaron looked at his fellow soldiers and saw their faces lighting up with understanding. Some whispered to each other, acknowledging the bonds they shared. Some raised their fists quietly in determination, and some simply closed their eyes, feeling the invisible presence of comrades and mentors who had shaped them. The courtyard was alive with an energy that was quiet, yet powerful, a unity that could not be broken by any enemy or any challenge. The Queen raised her sword once more. "Remember this day," she said, "not because you survived the war, but because you understand what it truly means to be part of something greater than yourself. You fight not alone, but with courage, loyalty, and memory as your companions. Together you will face any challenge, endure any hardship, and build a kingdom that will last for generations." Aaron's thoughts returned to his training days, when he had learned the importance of teamwork, trust, and leadership. Those lessons had prepared him for battle, but they had not prepared him for this realization: the power of unity, the strength of unseen bonds, and the importance of carrying the courage of others within him. The soldiers knelt together as one, heads bowed in respect and reflection. The Queen lowered her sword in a gesture of acknowledgement, honoring their understanding and their commitment. Aaron felt a surge of emotion rise within him, a mixture of pride, gratitude, and hope. He realized that the Queen's words were not just about loyalty, they were about connection, about the courage to carry others with you, and about the strength that comes from remembering those who have fallen. The morning passed quietly, but the lessons of that day spread quickly. Soldiers shared stories of their comrades, laughed at memories, and remembered the sacrifices that had shaped them. Even in small gestures, a touch on the shoulder, a nod of understanding, they expressed the bonds that had been forged in the fires of battle. Aaron found a quiet moment to himself near the edge of the courtyard. He looked at the sunlight reflecting off the palace walls and thought of Darren, Leora, and every soldier who had stood beside him. "I will carry you with me," he whispered. "In every battle, in every choice, in every step, you are with me." The Queen, standing on the steps above, observed quietly. She saw the soldiers' understanding reflected in their eyes, the realization that strength was not about fighting alone, but about carrying courage, memory, and loyalty together. She felt a quiet satisfaction. The question that had left the army speechless the day before had now united them. Their hearts were strong, and their spirits were connected in a way that no enemy could break. As the day continued, the soldiers began to move with renewed purpose. They trained with one another, shared stories, and supported each other in ways that strengthened their bonds further. Aaron practiced his swordsmanship, but this time with a sense of calm confidence. He knew that he carried not just his own strength, but the courage and memory of every soldier, friend and mentor who had stood beside him. Queen Lyra watched from the steps, her heart full. She understood that leadership was not about commanding alone, but about guiding, inspiring, and connecting. She had asked a simple question, "Are you alone?" But its impact had been profound. It had reminded the soldiers of their bonds, their courage, and their shared responsibility. And it had reminded her, too, that she was never alone. By midday, the soldiers had gathered their thoughts, their energy renewed. They marched through the courtyard in perfect formation, their heads held high and their hearts aligned with the Queen's teachings. Aaron walked among them, feeling a deep sense of pride and belonging. He knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. And so, the kingdom began to heal. The wounds of war were still visible, the memories of loss still fresh, but the bonds of unity, courage, and loyalty strengthened every soldier and every citizen. Queen Lyra's question had become a beacon, a reminder that no one, not even a queen, stood alone. The lessons of courage and connection would carry the kingdom forward, ensuring that the strength of the people would endure for generations. Aaron looked around at the soldiers beside him. Each face reflected determination, pride, and hope. Together, they were more than warriors. They were a family, bound by memory, loyalty, and shared courage. The Queen's question had given them a gift far greater than victory, the understanding that unity, not solitude, was the true source of strength. And in that golden morning, as sunlight bathed the courtyard, the soldiers and their queen understood a truth that would guide them forever. Alone, a person may survive. Together, they could achieve greatness. Years had passed since the great war that had tested the kingdom, its soldiers, and its queen. The kingdom had grown in prosperity, the cities had rebuilt, and the people had begun to live in peace. Yet the memories of those difficult times remained alive, not as sorrow, but as a guide. The soldiers who had survived had become teachers, leaders, and mentors. They carried the lessons of the battlefield with them, and they shared those lessons with the next generation. Among them, Aaron had risen to a respected commander, known for his wisdom, courage, and deep understanding of unity. Even now, the memory of the Queen's question, "Are you alone?" was never far from his mind. It had been more than a test or a lesson. It had been a truth he carried with him every day. He had understood that strength was not measured by sword, armor, or rank, but by the bonds shared with those around him, by the courage borrowed from friends who had fallen, and by the memory of loyalty that guided every action. The soldiers he now led were younger, eager, and full of energy. Many had not seen the Great War, yet they understood its lessons because Aaron made them real. He would gather them in the courtyard, much like the Queen had once done, and speak to them about courage, unity, and connection. "You are never alone," he would say, "even when it feels like it, even when fear threatens your heart. You carry the strength of those who believe in you and those who have walked beside you." The young soldiers listened carefully. Some had grown up in villages far from battle. Some had trained quietly within the palace walls, and some were children of veterans who had once served the kingdom. They had learned that strength alone could only carry a person so far. The invisible bonds, the memory of those who had sacrificed, the courage of comrades, the loyalty of friends were what transformed ordinary people into heroes. One day, Aaron stood in the training grounds watching a group of soldiers practice their formations. The morning sun glimmered off their armor, and their movements were precise. Yet what Aaron noticed most was their focus, their care for one another, and the subtle ways they encouraged each other. A young recruit stumbled while lifting his sword, but another placed a hand on his shoulder, steadying him without a word. Aaron smiled. That small act of unity carried more strength than any weapon. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky with gold and crimson, Aaron walked to the quiet edge of the training grounds. He looked at the distant palace, its towers glowing softly in the fading light. His thoughts drifted to the Queen who had guided the kingdom through so much, and to the friends he had lost in battle. He whispered their names silently, letting the memories fill the quiet air. "You are with me," he said softly. "Always." At that moment, a young soldier approached, hesitant but determined. "Commander Aaron," he said, bowing slightly. I don't understand fully yet. How do we carry those who are gone with us? How do they guide us if we cannot see them? Aaron knelt to meet the soldier's eyes. We carry them in our hearts, he explained gently. Their courage, their wisdom, and their kindness become part of us. When we make choices, when we face fear, when we protect someone weaker, we act with their strength. We honor them by remembering, by learning, and by sharing their courage with others. That is how they guide us. The young soldier nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. So even if I feel alone, I'm not? He asked. No, Aaron replied firmly. You are never alone. You are surrounded by those who came before you, those who fight beside you now and those who will follow in the future. Courage is not about solitude, it is about connection. It is about carrying the strength of others with you always. In the palace, Queen Lyra watched from her balcony. Though years had passed, her presence remained as steady and inspiring as ever. She had guided the kingdom through peace as skillfully as she had guided it through war. Every day she saw the lessons she had imparted growing stronger, reaching further than she could have imagined. The soldiers were no longer just fighters. They were protectors, teachers, and mentors. They carried the stories of the past forward, ensuring that the kingdom remained strong in spirit as well as in defense. That evening, the queen reflected quietly on the meaning of her question. She had asked it during a moment of great triumph, yet it had revealed more than victory ever could. It had revealed the invisible threads that connected hearts, the courage that could not be measured by armor or sword, and the strength that came from memory and unity. I was never alone, she whispered to the night sky, and neither were they. The following weeks were filled with lessons and celebrations. Soldiers shared stories of battles and bravery with children and villagers. They taught the importance of helping one another, remembering the fallen and acting with courage even in the smallest tasks. Aaron often led these gatherings, speaking with sincerity and humility. The children listened wide-eyed, absorbing the stories, while the adults nodded in quiet recognition of the truths they had once learned in harsher times. One day, Aaron was called to the palace to meet with Queen Lyra. She greeted him warmly, her eyes reflecting pride and understanding. Aaron, she said, the kingdom thrives not just because of your sword, but because of your heart. You have carried the lessons forward, and in doing so, you have ensured that no one forgets what it means to be part of something greater. Aaron bowed respectfully. Your Majesty, it was your question that guided me. It reminded me of those who stood beside me, those who believed in me, and those who will follow. I only hope to share that understanding with others. The Queen smiled. You have done more than hope. You have succeeded, and the kingdom will benefit from your courage, wisdom, and care for generations to come. Remember this. None of us ever truly walk alone. As the years continued, the kingdom grew stronger, wiser, and more united. The soldiers who had survived the war became leaders in their own right, teaching new generations about courage, loyalty, and the power of memory. Aaron continued to serve, but his greatest contribution was not in battles fought, but in hearts touched, lessons shared, and courage inspired. The phrase, "Are you alone?" became a saying among soldiers and citizens alike. It was no longer a question to frighten or challenge. It was a reminder of the strength found in connection, in memory, and in shared courage. People would ask it before journeys, before important decisions, and even before simple acts of bravery, not to demand an answer, but to remember the unseen support that surrounded them. One quiet evening, Aaron walked through the palace gardens, the same gardens where Queen Lyra had once walked as a child. He paused by a fountain, the water sparkling in the moonlight. He thought of all those who had shaped him, the soldiers, the mentors, the friends, and even the fallen. You are with me, he whispered again. Always. The queen, observing from her balcony, saw him and smiled softly. The kingdom had flourished, not just in strength, but in spirit. The lessons of unity, courage, and unseen bonds had taken root. The soldiers had learned to carry one another, to honor memory, and to act with compassion. And most importantly, they had learned that no one, not even a queen or a commander, was ever truly alone. As the wind rustled through the trees and the stars twinkled above, the kingdom rested in peace. The battles had ended, but the lessons endured. Every soldier, citizen, and leader carried within them the courage, memory, and loyalty of those who had come before. They understood that strength was not in solitude, but in connection. And in that understanding, the kingdom would remain strong, united, and free. Aaron finally turned to leave the gardens. a quiet determination in his step. He knew that life would continue to bring challenges and that courage would be required in ways beyond the battlefield. Yet he also knew that he was never alone. Not in battle, not in leadership, not in life. He carried the strength of countless hearts, past and present, guiding him with every step. Queen Lyra returned to her chambers, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. Her question had shaped not just soldiers, but the very spirit of the kingdom. "Alone is only a word," she whispered. "True courage is in the hearts we carry, the lives we honor, and the bonds we never forget." And so, the kingdom thrived, not just because of kings, queens, or warriors, but because every person understood the meaning of alone. They knew that even in silence, in struggle and in uncertainty, they were never truly without support. Courage, loyalty, and memory had become the true pillars of the realm. And in that knowledge, every heart, from the youngest child to the oldest soldier, stood stronger, braver, and united. The Queen's question had been simple, yet its answer was timeless. No one is ever truly alone. And together, people can achieve greatness beyond imagination.